to post-traumatic stress therapy, and it's the Help Equine Therapy Programs in Tranquil Acres near Ottawa. I had the pleasure of being there. My wife's been there. Great establishment, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to thank everyone for being here and congratulate you for being a part of this. And I also want to congratulate you for the next 30 minutes. You get to see me turn into a sweaty, anxious mess. My safe place is in the barn with the horses, standing in horse poop, shoveling it 24/7. So up here on the stage, talking in front of people is not my safe place. Today I'm going to talk to you about Heroes Equine Learning Program. So over the next 30 minutes we're going to talk about what is HELP, who is HELP for, why do we use horses in this work, and also the model that we follow, which is EGALA. EGALA stands for Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in the coming minutes. So what is Heroes Equine Learning Program? We started in 2014 out of Tranquil Acres in Ottawa. Actually this past June, we just got our not-for-profit status, and we're actually working towards our charitable status. In the past 3 months, we've actually expanded to 3 other facilities. So one of my colleagues is here, Anne. She's in Rockwood. She's also going to be providing the HELP program. We have one facility near Belleville in Sterling, and also just outside of Montreal for the French-speaking population. We hear from that colleague in Montreal that there isn't a whole lot for the French-speaking population. So we're happy and excited about that. The HELP program is a 4-day, 3-night retreat program. And it sounds weird to say, but we don't intend it to be therapy. So it must sound really weird on a day like today. We look at it as learning. We all know the symptoms of PTS and operational stress injuries. And as facilitators, we can't change what happened in the past. We really can't. As much as I would like to say that I can, we can't. And those incidents and those catastrophic events become part of who you are. So how do we better manage those triggers? So when you do start feeling like you're spiraling out of control, we help build your metaphorical toolbox, stuff that you can take home and practice in your own homes. So again, I talked to you about the Equine Assisted Growth and Learning model. So I'll cover that in a few minutes. And the next thing we really focus on in the program is it's all peer-based. So over the 4 days, we do yoga, we do meditation, we become mindful, we practice mindfulness, we do work with the horses. Everything is done as a group. There's no individual sessions, and that builds up that peer support. Quick example of that is our last retreat that we just had in February, 2 ladies from Ottawa, one is a corrections officer and one is the investigator with the Ottawa Police. They found out they lived around the corner from each other, but they never knew each other before then. Since then, they go for coffee, they go for tea, and they're actually 2 members of our board now. So they're helping each other out. So when one has a bad day, they call each other. They work with each other. And we're also looking for ways to help people talk about their experiences. And I like what Sid said in the previous example is being in a room with people that said, me too. So that's actually stuck with me, and that's probably gonna stay with me for the rest of my time facilitating this group, is building that team that you can sit around a table or be in the arena with the horses and say, me too. There's no judgment there. Here's the Equine Learning Program. Consists of 3 parts. So we hate to say phases, but we call them parts. So part 1 is for the individual themselves. So a quote that I saw way back when I was in high school was this one: you can't pour from an empty cup. How can you get people to help you if you don't know how to help yourself first? The second part is for the participant's partner. So this can be a spouse, a husband, a wife, son, a daughter, someone that's really close to them, but they want to bring into the journey themselves. And we talk about building healthy relationships and building healthy boundaries around that. And then part 3 is actually for the entire family to come. And again, this doesn't have to be your blood family. I have people in my life that I've met 20 years ago, and they have absolutely no blood relation to me, but I consider them my family. I have sisters, I have brothers, I have aunts, I have uncles. Even my best friends, they are my family. So we do consider that you can bring them to the help retreats as your family. Who is help for? We had a lot of discussion as we were building this program. Who were we making it for? So these are the 6 populations that we offer the help program for. So military, police, fire, corrections, EMS, and 911 dispatchers. And it doesn't matter if you're active or retired. You still served in one of these populations, and we'll take you on. And also, we had a lot of discussions as we were developing. How do we define what a first responder is? And actually, this just came to us this past weekend. We had an EGALA training at our facility in Ottawa, and the clinical director of EGALA was actually one of the trainers for it, and she helped us with this. So we came up with someone who is physically present to respond to an external catastrophic environmental event, and or someone remotely present, 911 dispatchers, to manage or be responsible to manage response to that catastrophic event. And so a lot of the questions that we get is why horses? From my experiences, horses are expensive. Okay, they're really expensive. We put money out to take care of the horses, and a lot of stuff comes out the back end, and we actually have to pay money to take them away. So horses are a lot of money. The first thing is horses are actually naturally prey animals. So out in the wild, they are prey animals. They have to be hypervigilant in their environment. So that way they know whether a wolf is around the next tree. They can sense that. It almost gives them a sixth sense. Another thing is reflection. With that hypervigilance, they're able to mirror back what's going on inside us. So for example, if I'm having a really, really shitty day at work, okay, they will notice that and they'll let me know. And they don't care if I'm angry. They don't care if I'm sad. They don't care if I'm happy. They want me to own it. So as long as I own that I'm sad or that I'm angry, they're okay with that. They want us to be congruent with what's on the outside and what's on the inside. So a story that I like to tell people is, I was having a really shitty day at work, okay? I was mad at everyone. Everyone wasn't doing the job. Everyone was stupid, okay? And I came home from work and I was picking the paddocks, picking up all the poo. And one of my horses, he usually follows me around as I'm pushing the wheelbarrow, and that's not normal for him. But this day, he bowled me over. He took his head right in the middle of my back, knocked me to the ground. So I went from pissed to really pissed. Okay? I was ready to get up and teach him a lesson, but then he came closer to me and just stood over me. And if you imagine, his back is probably about here. So he's a big guy. And if you're on the ground, that's even bigger. Okay? And the message that came to me is like, you're angry. You need to deal with that. You really need to deal with that because it's going to stay with you if you don't deal with that right now. And as soon as that thought came into my head, he licked his lips and walked away. So that just goes to show you that they really don't care if we're angry. They want us to deal with and be congruent with ourselves. And the last thing that I kind of already touched on is they're big. Okay. On the farm, our facility, we have 2 minis. They're tiny. They're not as imposing. But our big guy, in horse language, is about 17 hands. And his back starts about 6 inches from the top of my head. Working with these large animals, it's really humbling. So when you're in the presence of a 1,300-pound animal and they're just being with you, just standing beside you without any judgment, that's powerful. You just have to be able to take that in. And that's a lot of what we do during our retreats. We do activities on the ground, and the activities, they become metaphors. Another story that I can tell, one of our first retreats, we had a gentleman over the 4 days, probably said about 2 words. Okay, we knew there was a lot of stuff going on there. He was processing as we went through the retreat. And what we did as the last activity is we put a pole about 6 inches off the ground and we said, move the horses over that pole. And then we checked in after and there was a bunch of opinions. And then he finally spoke up. And he said, I've been on a roller coaster of emotions this past 4 days. And then we asked him what those emotions were, and he didn't want to share it, and that's okay. But what he did say is, the horse went that way over the pole, and the horse went that way. And what that meant to me was that it doesn't matter if I'm going this way, if I'm going that way, I'm always moving forward. So it might seem really simple about this pole, 6 inches off the ground. Might be like, what are you doing? But that was that for him. And everyone else had their own experience within that group. Now I'm going to go into the EGALA model, and I just have a little video here that explains that EGALA model. It's about 8 minutes long. Okay, so I was hoping for the video. What it was, you can actually go to egala.org. It's a video taken from our military designation. And what it does is it actually shows the EGALA model in practice. And our CEO, Lynn Thomas, she does a really good way, much better than I can, of explaining the model. So we follow this model religiously. We see the benefits of it. And it's a not-for-profit organization. It started down in Utah back in '99. And in the little less than 20 years, it's actually grown into 52 countries. And it has 3,500 members practicing this model. So if it doesn't work, how can we have 3,500 professionals giving this model? It's actually been scientifically studied and proven in the mental health field, in equine-assisted learning and personal development. If you want, after the presentation, I can send you a few links for, I don't want to bore you guys with stats and everything, but it has been shown to work for this population. The main reason and what makes us different from other organizations that practice equine-assisted learning and personal development is that EGALA has a really strong code of ethics. So what we hear about is that we like EGALA because people telling us we like EGALA because of those code of ethics. It shows that we do have a standard of practice, and they're strict on that. Like, if they see that you're not following them, they will tell you, and they will make sure that you are following that. And they also have 4 standards that I really want to drive home. It's a team approach. So during the 4 days, we always have at least 2 facilitators doing any activity, whether it's with the horses, mindfulness, yoga, meditation, nature meditation, anything. There's always two. So in the equine sessions, there's an equine specialist, such as myself, as well as a mental health professional. I'm not trained to deal with mental health issues. I'm not going to pretend that I am. I know about them, but that's why I have that mental health professional partner there. Whether it's a psychotherapist, a psychologist, psychiatrist, someone or a social worker, someone that is trained in dealing with those crises. Second one is it's solution oriented. We're always working towards something. That's not saying by the end of 3 sessions with us, you're going to be rainbows and butterflies and all smiles. We're not saying that. We're saying that we're always working towards something. How can we better ourselves? How can we better manage those triggers and come down back to some level of normalcy? The third one is everything is ground-based. So during the retreat, a lot of people think of horses and immediately think of riding. That's not the case here. As much as I love galloping around the fields, it's a lot of fun. But everything is done on the ground. Okay? When you're on the horse's back, the horse is trained to do what it's supposed to do. So whether I pull on the reins this way, it's going to turn right. If I pull on the reins this way, it's going to turn left. It's trained to do that. But on the ground, it's a horse. It's going to do what it needs to do in that moment. And that really helps with that reflection and that self and that personal development. So say that horse needs to go knock over that pylon that says suicide or that says anger. It's going to go do that. And whatever it is for that participant at that moment in time, that's what it is. And also that horse might all of a sudden become your husband, your wife, your mother, your father. So now it's not just the horse knocking over a pylon. It's your husband or wife knocking over suicide. So hopefully that example gives you an idea of how powerful this work can be. And the last one is, their slogan is the global standard for equine-assisted psychotherapy and personal development. In the retreat, like I said, we don't intend it for it to be therapy. We go for more the personal development side. And a personal story of mine, I live at Tranquil Acres in Ottawa, and so I drove down yesterday to attend the conference today. And I was struggling for the 6-hour drive, stuck in traffic in Toronto, as always, whether I should tell this story or not. And I think it's really powerful. About a year ago, I was in a dark place. I was having nightmares every night. I was maybe getting an hour's sleep. I was shutting down. My partner, I wouldn't talk to him anymore. I would come home and I would work. I would go to work and I would work, come home and work. And he noticed that in me. And so I actually had to take a leave from work. And that was really tough for me to hear from someone so close to me, like, there's something going on and you need to deal with that now. And so in hindsight, I only took a week, but I probably should have taken more. But that week that I was off work, I went and sat in my field with my horse. And horses like to eat, okay? They eat for 16 hours a day. And we are in a big field full of grass. And grass is like cocaine for horses, okay? It really is. And that big guy that I was telling you about, he's my horse. And I would sit and I would cry. And this is really tough for me because I don't cry. Okay, that's not me. I'm better than that, but I'm really not. And 9 acres of grass, he came and stood beside me for 5 straight days. Because I was owning what I was doing. I was like, I'm sad. I need to change what I'm doing because it's not good for me. And he came and stood beside me. So that was really powerful for me. And when my mind was going back to, okay, shrug it off. You got this, you're okay. His foot would stomp, and pretty close to me. It was kind of scary. So yeah, just imagine 14 pounds of weight coming down about 2 inches from your foot. And he would get me to notice that, okay, your mind's switching back to, I'm okay. No, you're not. Okay? It's all right to be not okay. And he really showed me that I'm okay now, but that I needed to deal with that in that moment. So again, that's another example of how powerful these forces can be in the help retreat. What is my role as a facilitator? So really what we want to do is assist in that change. So if you can picture a bowl, stay with me here. Picture a bowl, and at one edge, you're at the top, and something happens, and you start sliding down. Okay, talking about that abyss. You're going into that abyss, and then you're at the bottom. We're there to assist in that change, okay? To get you back to the other side. You may not look like the same thing on both sides, and again, that's okay. But we're there to help in that side down and that side up. So this is what we would want our journey to look like, right? Nice and easy, straight line, point A to point B, okay? Make all the right decisions. But what does it really look like? That. Okay, we have highs, we have lows, we have loop-de-loops. And that's just a fact of life. And we're there to assist in that change, however that needs to look for the participant at that time. We attended, EGALA has an international conference every year, and I attended the one in Kentucky this year. And the keynote speaker, Heather Plett, she talked a lot about holding space. So as facilitators, this is what we do, and this is her definition of holding space. Holding space means that we are willing to walk alongside another person in whatever journey they're on without judging them, making them feel inadequate, trying to fix them, or trying to impact the outcome. We're not trying to tell you how you should feel. We're not trying to tell you how you should look. There's absolutely no judgment on the facilitators and the horses as facilitators too. Like I said, they don't care if you're sad or angry. They want to make sure that you're owning that emotion. So here's the goal. Okay. So if you can imagine that one side, you're starting out as a police officer, firefighter, you're gung-ho, you're going to do good. And all of a sudden something happens and you start sliding down into the middle of the bowl. Okay, you start falling to pieces. As facilitators in the help program, we're that bowl for you. We're holding that space for you until you're ready to put all those pieces back together to be the other person that you are. So I decided to show this picture again. It really shown me personally how holding space and how the horses are as holding space. So I'm gonna invite you guys to remember this picture and see what holding space means for you. Okay? I bet you if I went around to each and every one of you, it would be a different definition. And that's the beauty of this work. There's no right or wrong in this work as a facilitator for Heroes Equine Learning Program. So with that, I'm just going to read kind of our slogan. Heroes Equine Learning Program. We're setting the standard for equine assisted learning and personal development for military and first responders affected with post-traumatic stress and our operational stress injuries. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to call up the best dressed guy in the room right now, Dr. Jonathan Douglas.
It's working.
Beautiful.
So, I put discovered in quotes here because I definitely did not discover perceived injustice.
what this presentation represents, I like to conceive it as the polar opposite of peer support. Peer support is about people at your level helping you, and perceived injustice is about people not at your level harming you. So let's take a look and see what we can learn from this. Now, you have to kind of bear with me for a moment, because I'm going to step away from the whole area of operational stress injury and first responders, and we're going to take a little side road into the world of auto insurance. Now, auto insurance examination, when you are in an auto accident, the insurer has the right to request an independent assessment. And I used to do a fair number of these. And what I would do is typically called the post-104 disability assessments. This post-104 meant after 104 weeks, this person's still on the books. Why aren't they getting better? Let's do a comprehensive set of assessments and figure out why. So they would be sent to me for that purpose. So by 2008, I had completed about 100 of these assessments. So what would we expect statistically from these assessments? Okay, most accidents involve two vehicles. Okay, there are some exceptions to that, obviously, but most motor vehicle accidents would involve two vehicles. There'd be a few single vehicle accidents, a few multi-vehicle accidents. Let's say they cancel each other out. So I assessed very few passengers. There were a few that I had assessed, but it's very rare that the passenger ends up being there, which I suspect is because we just don't carpool very much. So let's say then that among drivers who are at fault in the accident and not at fault in the accident, hypothetically, there should be approximately an equal opportunity here to be injured in the accident. So very roughly, 50% of injured drivers would be at fault in the accident. 50% of them would be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Okay? Roughly, very, very roughly speaking, but we'd expect something along those lines. So what did I actually find? So my sample represents people struggling 2 years after the accident. Most of these people have both physical and psychological injuries, whether it's PTSD, depression, chronic pain of some kind with a psychological component. A few have only psychological injuries. The results, 95% were the drivers not at fault in the accident. 95%. Okay? Think about that for a second. Only 5% were the driver that had caused the accident. The other 95 who were still struggling 2 years after the event. And bear in mind, we have a no-fault insurance system here, right? You have access regardless, right? Makes no real difference. But 95% of them that were still struggling have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I began to research this concept, and I couldn't find it initially, but eventually I did. So Sullivan is a researcher, psychologist out of McGill, and it's kind of amazing actually to stumble across this because he's writing this up at the same time that I was questioning what the heck is going on here. And he studies in rehab psychology, which is about the recovery following physical injuries. And he developed what he called the Injustice Experience Questionnaire, which was a goofy little 12-item survey, which I think really just skirts the surface of what is a very profound concept here, as I'll explain. So let's take a look at what are some of the sources of perceived injustice. First, unnecessary suffering. Okay? Somebody else did something negligent. You are now suffering for that. It's a violation of your basic human rights at times. Can certainly contribute to that. A transgression of status or rank. So imagine, say, for example, maybe you were a teacher and you get attacked by a student, right? That crossing of boundaries can contribute to your sense of this is profoundly unjust. It's an experience of irreplaceable, irreparable loss, and it challenges our sense that the world makes sense, okay? We believe in the just world hypothesis, that if I'm a good person, basically things will work out for me, okay? And, this really, these events, these accidents can really stand in the way of that. I want to note that the word perceived here does not imply biased perception. It doesn't imply inaccurate perception. It simply implies perception. Okay? All experience is perceived. So this is not about, whether or not it's accurate. It simply means that in that person's judgment, there has been some injustice. This is an unconscious process. So what is the impact? Well, the IEQ, that Injustice Experiences Questionnaire, that goofy little 12-item questionnaire, predicts prolonged disability following physical injury independent of the severity of the injury. Okay? Think about that. It doesn't matter how badly hurt you were. This does a better job predicting whether or not you're still disabled 2 years later. Among those scoring at the 75th percentile on this questionnaire, 76% remain unemployed 1 year after the injury. 74% describe themselves as totally disabled for work. 70% were moderately depressed. 2009, he looks at 112 whiplash injuries who are referred to a multidisciplinary rehab program. He measures pain, PTSD, physical function, and pain-related psychological variables. And he finds that indicators of pain severity do not contribute to the persistence of PTSD symptoms. Only perceived injustice emerges as a unique predictor of the persistence of PTSD. How does it work? Now, I'm going to step away here from Sullivan's work. So now we're going into my own theory, okay? Because Sullivan's work, as brilliant as it is, and as exciting as it was for me to find this thing, and believe me, when it's one of these ideas where I came across and I went, wow, that really makes sense. And then I stopped and I thought, that really makes sense. And then I stopped and thought, this really makes sense. The layers of this thing are so profound, but they go way beyond what Sullivan talked about in motor vehicle accidents and physical injury. I want you to take a moment now to consider the following. Think of the consequences, the potential outcomes of somebody running a stop sign. Okay? These run from the trivial to the fatal. Okay? You can have nothing. You can be seen, so you feel mildly stupid and embarrassed. You might be pulled over, given a ticket. You might cause a minor accident. You might cause a fairly significant accident. You might cause an injury. You might cause a fatality. Okay? And we recognize this in law, by the way, in some places. There's a difference between negligence and negligence causing death. As if the negligence that doesn't cause death wasn't as bad as the negligence that did, which kind of makes sense, doesn't it? There's only one problem with this concept, and that is that the driving error is the same across all these different outcomes. It's still the same stupid little error, okay? You ran a stop sign. You weren't paying attention. You were fiddling with your phone, right? Whatever it was. Justified bitterness. So here's the logic here. If I'm not injured, if I'm the injured party, right? If I'm not injured in the car accident, you scuffed my bumper. Your action is trivial. It's no big deal. I'm slightly irritated, but I'm not going to be that bad of a shape about it. If I am injured, your action is not trivial, okay? So in other words, my injury proves something about your action, okay? My injury proves that what you did was wrong, which means, logically, if I get better, I'm letting you off the hook. Now this, of course, is crazy, right? This is nonsensical. This is not a good thing to do, but it's also unconscious. So there's something about certain events that cause us to get stuck. Remember, this perceived injustice is highly related to still being disabled years after the event. So features of the event that can make it worse, and these go beyond what Sullivan had to say. The severity of the outcome, fatality versus minor injury to the car. Whether there's a criminal act involved, okay? Running a stop sign that's going to be irritating to me. Today, running a stop sign because that person was fiddling with their phone, guess what? We're going to have a stronger emotional reaction to that today, which is irrational, right? But it seems more wrong to us than running the stop sign because you were fiddling with the radio, okay? If you're injured in a car accident with a drunk driver, that seems worse to us than if the person was sober. If you are injured in a car accident because someone was driving a stolen car, okay? If they're driving without a license, okay? The income physically to us is the same in all of these, right? But the outcome emotionally is profoundly different depending on the circumstance of that accident. The betrayal of trust, for example, the doctor-patient sexual relationship, okay? It's one thing to be injured, it's another thing to be injured by someone who is supposed to be taking care of you, supposed to be trusting you. You're supposed to be able to trust that person, rather. The mere presence of a child, okay? This is something I discovered in those 100 assessments, okay? It didn't matter whether or not the child present at the scene was injured. It didn't even matter whose car the child was in. There was a child there, and that person caused an accident. We have this sense, how dare you? My child was there, or your child was there. You ran a stop sign and you had a kid in the car? The circumstances increase our emotional reaction to the circumstance, to the event. The failure of a perpetrator to take responsibility. This idea really started to percolate for me. I was working with a woman, wonderful woman, and she had been in exactly this situation. She's driving down the road, and somebody comes shooting out from a parking lot, T-bones her, and she's just not only, physically still struggling with chronic pain, but emotionally, she's just so angry. And what it came down to was she had been put in the back seat of the cruiser with the other driver, an older man, who, did that classic phrase, as if it somehow excuses what had happened, but, oh, I'm sorry, I confused the brake and the gas pedal, And he's sitting in the back seat with her, and she's, upset by what's happened. And he pats her on the knee and says, there, dear. These things happen, right? And her rage just, oh, no, they don't, right? But that failure that he had to take responsibility for his actions was a major portion of the rage that she felt about this accident. And invalidation, okay? Your injury is trivial, suck it up, it doesn't matter, you're not really that sick, okay? So how do we resolve perceived injustice? Sullivan said in 2014 that the relation between perceived injustice and adverse outcomes has been demonstrated in a wide range of pain conditions, but that perceptions of injustice do not appear to respond to current treatment approaches. What he recommended is, what we need is a paradigm shift. We need to broaden the targets of assessment and intervention beyond the perceptions of the injured individuals to include potential external sources of injustice. For example, the employer, the insurer, or the healthcare provider. Okay? Let me translate that for a moment, okay? What he's saying is, if someone is feeling stuck and embittered and enraged at the circumstance that they find themselves in, maybe we should be looking at the circumstance they find themselves in. Ooh, there's a radical idea, right? Maybe if this person is so angry, we should ask, well, has their claim been turned down by the auto insurance, by the WSIB, right? Has the employer treated them badly? What's going on that they're getting stuck in this? Maybe it doesn't exist only in the person that they're feeling so stuck and embittered. In the auto insurance world, there are two potential bad guys in an accident. There's the driver at fault, and there's the insurer who denies benefits and treatment. Okay? And believe me, they deny benefits and treatment. This is what we call sanctuary trauma. Okay? A sanctuary trauma is when You expect help, okay? You expect to receive comfort and compassion and help, but instead of trust, you experience abuse. So who has acted unjustly? If you're talking about an operational stress injury, oh, that's right, we're talking about operational stress injuries, not car accidents, right? But in operational stress injuries, who are the potential bad guys? There were two for the auto insurance. Here we've got the perpetrator, the Special Investigations Unit, the media, the employer, your peers, the long-term disability insurer, the WSIB. That's a short list, right? We could probably expand on that. But they all boil down to one thing. It's the sense of betrayal, okay? You expect to receive support, and instead what you experience is rejection, okay? You experience denial of the validity of what you're experiencing. It leaves the individual feeling profoundly invalidated, okay? You know, the experience of somebody saying, I get it, is completely removed when WSIB says, yeah, I'm sorry, your claim is not going to work, right? For whatever reason. Now, this is one of the great values of the Bill 163. And the reason why suddenly there's a lot more claims coming forward isn't because, suddenly they're more likely to be accepted. I believe the reason why more claims are coming forward is because people feel validated. In almost any chronic PTSD case for a police officer, let's say, what WSIB requires is, what was the one trauma that did it to you? Well, and you say, well, I've got 30-year history. Choose a file at random, right? Choose a file at random. Which one would you like? It would work, hypothetically, it could work. So it's not really that hard, okay? The difference is that now they aren't allowed to say no. And that's the critical difference. And you no longer have to worry about the rejection. And that's why so many more police officers and firefighters and such are starting to stand up and seek the help. The invalidation says your pain is not real, okay? When you open up that envelope that says, WSIB says, I'm sorry. Now this can still happen, by the way. Don't think that, Bill 163 has solved all problems, right? Because Bill 163, I'm going to switch this way because it's getting a little bit too much, let's try. Are you on? You're on. Okay. So, as I was saying, Bill 163 is not solving all the problems. Okay? It's not a status quo. If I had designed Bill 163, which I did not, because strangely enough, they did not phone me and say, what exactly should we put in this? But if I had designed it, what I could have done would have been operational stress injury. Okay? Which is not an official term. Oh, can we do anything about that static? One second here. All right, back to this one. Okay. So I would have gone with operational stress injury as a term rather than PTSD. For the obvious reason that the employer and WSIB can argue now whether or not your operational stress injury meets the criteria for PTSD. If it doesn't, guess what? It's not presumed. So the depression, the substance abuse does not count right? Only PTSD does, and that means that it opens up the question whether or not you meet every single criterion for PTSD. And it's going to open up, the debates between one psychologist and another, or one psychiatrist and another, about whether or not this person precisely meets all the criteria for PTSD. Okay? So there's still going to be room for you to get that letter that says, I'm sorry, your claim is denied. And when you get that letter, you don't say to yourself, oh, well, that's fine. I get that. That's okay. I didn't meet all the criteria. Oh, well. No, you get that letter and you feel like you just got hit in the gut. Okay? Because it's invalidated. They did not get it. I'm going to read to you an actual Facebook post that somebody sent me. It's got strong language in it. Don't get me started on this police officer wrote. $100,000 to count paper clips while the rest of us work our asses off because the platoons are depleted. Some are genuine claims and legitimate, but most are a bunch of dog fuckers. Okay? I want to demonstrate here, by the way, I want you to point out, notice how far we've come in fighting stigma. Okay? Because this guy acknowledges that some claims are in fact genuine and legitimate. So, we're making great headway. We've gone from all our dog fuckers to only some are dog fuckers. Now, how do we assess for dog fucking? Well, as a matter of fact, I'm an expert in this. We defend against fraud through thorough assessment. And guess what? Psychological assessments are actually pretty good at picking up on it. Okay? It's not easy to tell, as you well know, if somebody is lying, right? But we can pick things up on psychological tests about how someone is presenting on this test. So WSIB and auto insurers love to send people for independent assessments. And then they love to do it again. And then they love to do it again. Okay? So they really love sending people for assessments. In each single assessment that happens, what happens? You have to prove that you are ill. You have to be able to say, here are my symptoms, right? Here's what's wrong with me. Here's the proof that I'm still impaired. Here's the proof that I'm still disabled. Okay? Every time that you do that, you're basically doubling down on your own symptoms. Right? It's the exact opposite of cognitive behavioral therapy. Right? In cognitive behavioral therapy, we try to teach people what you're capable of doing. And then after a good round of that, we send you off to an assessment where your job is now to prove to them what you're capable of not doing. Right? It's the exact opposite of good psychology. It gets people stuck. Conflicts with the insurers will certainly get people stuck. They have to prove again and again that I'm still sick. If you get in a conflict with WSIB, you have the right to go to a tribunal. It'll only take 1 to 3 years to get there. Right? During which time they've probably cut off your income. Do you know how many people I have had declare bankruptcy, go into consumer proposal, because WSIB cut off their income? Recent case I heard, okay, this is truly obscene. A psychologist is working with somebody, and cognitive behavioral therapy, the guy's got agoraphobia. He's fearful of going out in public places. So she gives him homework. I want you to go to a store and spend 20 minutes in that store. The guy does this successfully. Great news, right? He was under surveillance. So what happens? WSIB a few days later phones him up and says, sorry, we're cutting off your benefits. We caught you in a store. You said you couldn't go shopping. So this is a joke, right? I mean, this is so easy to solve. Psychologist phones them up and says, I get what you're saying. Don't worry about it. He was doing homework. Okay, it was actually, he's following through on something I told him to do. So, it's fine, right? No, they didn't move back on their decision, and he had to go to tribunal. What does that do to the possibility of getting better? Is he ever going to trust another psychologist again? Right? It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So they often end up with no income. How do you get better when you need your symptoms in order to prove your case? Right? 3 years later, he goes to the tribunal, right? Is he going to be saying, I'm perfectly fine now, I'm absolutely great, I got no residual symptoms, but 3 years ago when you cut me off, you know, boy, I was still struggling. Is he going to win that case? Right? He still needs his symptoms now. His symptoms prove his case. And his symptoms on top of that now prove how unjustly WSIB treated him. Right? And the evidence of their unjust treatment of him is how badly impaired he now is perceived in justice. Right? This is messed up. This is very distinct, by the way, from malingering. Malingering is, in order to make money, I'm going to convince you that I'm sick when I know that I'm not. Okay? These people absolutely believe that they are sick, and they are. Okay? Perceived injustice is something that makes the genuine injury more genuine. Okay? It is more intense as a result of this stuff. It's not about malingering, it's about how the system prevents healing. So the mistreatment of disabled people carries a huge cost. It increases the severity, the duration, and the cost of every disability claim. It interferes with recovery from injury, whether it's physical or psychological. And when people feel invalidated and rejected, they are less likely to heal. So what's the cure? Well, on the individual level, the cure is acceptance. Okay? The world is not fair. That's the way it is. Forgiveness. Okay? To be able to truly let go of the bitterness, the anger, the rage. Right? To recognize that these are things that you're going to be doing not for WSIB, not for the boss, not for the union that failed to support you, but something you're going to be doing for yourself. Okay? For your family. Okay? These are not easy things to achieve. And Sullivan's quite right when he says, you know, ordinary treatment doesn't touch these things. We need to be aware of them. But beyond that, we need to start looking at the system. Huge amounts of money go into preventing malingering, preventing insurance fraud. But compassionate care can probably save way more money than fraud ever costs the system. Bill 163, no doubt, is going to cost money at first, right? But its biggest impact is invalidating, or is putting an end to the invalidation that first responders feel when they reach out to WSIB. And that is going to make treatment easier. It's going to end up saving money in the long run, especially if people end up seeking services not after 30 years, but after 3 years, right? That would be far, far better. There we have it. Thanks very much.
Always a pleasure hearing Dr. Jonathan talk, and when his new book comes out, he realizes that I'm the poster boy for the cover of his magazine. We are going to call on Steve Critchley from CanPraxis to come up and speak about equine
Good day. Long day for you. A lot of sitting on your ass listening to people yap. Hopefully we can give you some good information so you can move forward with some good decisions. I'm here to talk about CanPraxis, therapeutic equine program with very specific aims and purposes. One of those things that we want to talk about is we know for a fact that if you've been diagnosed with PTSD, conflict and crisis will become part of your life. In other words, you're fucked. With that, we know that no therapy, no peer support group, no medication, nothing will help you recover from PTSD unless you can talk. It is a quite simply, very, very basic component here that if you're not talking, you're going to die. It's a hard reality, and our job has one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to get people to start talking. I'd like you to take a second and read that, if you would, please, if you can. Are you able to read that at the back, or should I? Oh yeah, I'll read it out for you. Can praxis means everything to me. Upon initial contact mid-September 2015, Steve talked me through a very dark, life-threatening situation. My daughter and my attendance at Can Praxis in October brought me hope and discovery, and through Jim, an exquisite understanding of pressure and release. In my relationships, I live the communication and the conflict resolution, self-mediation lessons learned every single day, and will continue to refine my understanding of them for the rest of my life. For these things and more, I am grateful and I give thanks. What I didn't know when he called me is he was on the 401 looking for a dump truck to drive into. And I only found that out when he was sitting with a bunch of his peers when we started the first day introductions on the program. It's a pretty scary thing to find out that a conversation has that much impact, which reinforces everything that we're talking about as communication. Everything you need to survive and to move forward with PTSD is focused solely on communication. We understand silence will bring suicide. Skills and knowledge bring realistic hope. That means you talk, you can survive. So what is this program all about? First, let me talk a bit about the name Can Praxis. Can is short form for the Canadian can-do attitude. In other words, almost 100 years ago when they said, you can't take Vimy Ridge, you said, fuck you, and we took it. Praxis is to take theory and put it into practice. So long story short, what Can Praxis is all about is walk the talk. So we focus on self-mediation training and equine-assisted learning. The combination of that is understanding that every time you're standing beside a horse, you're having a conversation. One of the reasons horses are so effective is, like people, the main form of communication is nonverbal. So as most of you are probably aware, that 93% of any conversation you have with someone is nonverbal. That includes grunts, groans, tone, inflection. It only leaves 7% of your conversation is words. We've had individuals show up on the program and they tell us their therapist has said the only way they should talk to each other is by texting. If I ever get a hold of that therapist, I'm going to slap them silly. The whole understanding here is you need to talk to someone, and that someone needs to be the person that's most important to you. Every program we have, and we run a program with 6 couples every month. Half of them are here in Ontario, half where I come from, the center of the universe, Alberta. And in this setting we've had spouses, we've had partners, same-sex partners, partners that work together. We've had a 15-year-old daughter, and we've had a 71-year-old mother. Can you imagine what it's like for a combat veteran? The only person that will talk to them at all is a 71-year-old mother, and that's who you come to a PTSD therapy program with. It takes a lot of canachos, and they're doing very well. And what we're doing with this 6 couples, and the reason we go with 6 is so that you can't hide and become part of the wallpaper. And the other side of that, the flip side of that is, that gives us as much time as we need to talk to you for the 3 days. We're teaching you self-mediation techniques. We are not a retreat. And holy cow, there are some people that should not be married. And we have no problems telling some people that. This is not, let me say, the tagline for our program is we're not into chasing rainbows or hugging unicorns. Hold my hand, sing kumbaya, you get a slap upside the head. We're not very, very huggy at all. And the reason for that is PTSD is a killer. And it deserves the proper respect. And that means it's time to roll up your sleeves, get serious, and deal with this, and understand it's as deadly as what it says it is. So that means we need specific qualifications. My time, I spent 28 years in uniform with the military. Near the end of that time, I was tagged during that Somalia fun stuff to be a harassment investigator, harassment advisor. I thought, hey, cool, this is something I can take to City Street. They don't know what the hell they're doing. And during that time, I got involved in mediation, conflict resolution. They must have liked what I was doing because DND, Department of National Defense, tagged me to be a mediator in uniform, where I would go around mediating conflict between commanding officers and corporals, the fun stuff, you know, sexual harassment, abuse of authority, all the good stuff. They liked what I was doing. Next, I was mediating conflict between civilians and uniformed people, management and unions. I actually did the very first mediation with Cup W. And when I pulled the plug and retired, it wasn't unusual for me to go to Dubai 5-6 times a year with a large group of West Africans, half Christian, half Muslim, and at the end of it, they'd all be good friends. So when it comes to conflict, if I'm not causing it, I'm very good at helping people resolve it. So my focus is on conflict. I work with Jim Marlin, probably the best psychologist for PTSD in the country.
Hey.
Is. I'll say it again. I have no problems. With that, he comes from a background of the prison system, Corrections Canada. He spent over 20 years in prisons dealing with the fun clientele, you know, the ones, they're in solitary confinement 23 out of 24 hours a day. So we both come from a background of violence and death. And the thing about a prison population, it's very similar to the uniform environment. Someone's got to be boss. It's all about respect, cock of the walk. You pay attention to me. I give you respect if you deserve it, etc., etc., etc. So that means we get buy-in from our participants pretty quick because they feel that we understand where they're coming from. And what we're doing is we're helping them repair their own relationships. And we're helping them relearn interpersonal skills and knowledge. We're helping them gain relief from their PTSD symptoms. We're helping them gain emotional stability. Basically, here's one example. This couple, my spouse is coping with PTSD. I need to learn to cope with PTSD and his coping. PTSD was a big scary entity that I avoided. We no longer leave things unresolved by avoiding them. In other words, if you've got everyone standing around a big muck puddle and you're throwing a big rock, everyone gets splashed with the shit. There are no innocents. So on our programs, the spouse is not there to support the veteran. The spouse is there because they're injured just as bad. They need to be heard. They need to be acknowledged. They need to be understood just as much as the individual originally diagnosed with PTSD. And I think I mentioned it on every program. We have at least one suicidal veteran, and we are now seeing suicidal spouses. And the veterans, 9 times out of 10, and I get them to admit this when they're sitting beside their spouse, will admit to lying through their teeth to their therapists. It's important to understand they will often play the game and string their therapists along as far as they can in order to think they're winning. Our job is to help them realize they're full of shit and start being honest with their therapists. They need the therapist. So with this, the self-mediation, what is it that we're teaching them? Well, we're teaching them a communication strategy. No conversation, no resolution. There needs to be a conversation. And to help develop behavioral skills that are positive. To get them out of those negative Facebook groups. You see the ones where there's individuals that create these groups who are refusing to get help for their own PTSD. And the only way they'll help, or the only way they feel good, is to drag someone down to the bottom of the cesspit with them so they can stand on top. And you've heard it said here before, get rid of the negative people and start relearning what positive behaviors are. And how to We basically teach people to argue. We let people know that conflict is normal. Conflict is a part of an everyday life experience. Conflict is not to be feared. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Conflict brings about positive change. And we help them feel comfortable understanding what conflict is. Also, we also teach what we call IA and secondary actions, or immediate action drills and secondary action drills. And what we mean by that, anyone who's worked with a weapon knows immediate action for weapon fires all right, weapon stops. There's a drill you immediately jump into without thinking. We're helping these people jump into these immediate action drills if they're having a conversation and it starts to go sideways and become destructive, either mentally or physically. The IA is one or both, we'll use the safe word, and it's stop drop. Just like walking through a minefield, the big nasty happens, boom, you freeze. Your next thing is you retrace your footsteps back to safe ground and hunker down. Then we teach them the secondary action, which is at the appropriate time, the appropriate place, in the appropriate manner, how to get back into that conversation and finish it off. So that you're not ignoring things. You're not sweeping more stuff under the rug, because the reality is if you sweep everything under the rug, eventually you're going to trip over it one day and break your neck. You cannot avoid conversations. You need to relearn how to have them. And with that, it's helping them understand it's not me against you, it's us against the problem. And to help them recognize when is it your loved one and when is it the injury. You can understand it's two different situations and how to approach them in an effective manner that works for your relationship. Because what we're teaching is not a cookie cutter outcome. How you talk to your loved one can be totally different than how someone next to you does. That's okay. We just want you to talk. So why is it required? Well, here's for one thing. One participant comes back and says, I find I am better able to process any situation that arises. Conflict with my family, resolution of old problems, working through my own issues of PTSD and abuse and anger. We have many, 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 many testimonials that we can throw out here, too easy. Relationships are difficult to change, and without change, people die. So we're looking at improved communication, changing behavior, repairing relationships, and helping people flourish in a way that works for them. So, since day one, we've been very fortunate. We've had Dr. Randy Duncan in partnership with the University of Saskatchewan. Dr. Randy Duncan, he's been doing this research psychology stuff for over 20 years. So we've been very fortunate that he volunteers his time, and he's created several psychological measurement instruments for people like me that's fill in A, B, or C to the above question, a simple study. He's created a total of 6. Here is one, the Holster, which is horses relieving operational stress through experiential relationships. With this, there's a specific instrument for the veterans and one for the spouses. And with that, he takes them, he goes through all the knowledge, he does the peer review at the University of Saskatchewan, the Medical Review Board, all that good stuff, and comes back with the findings. Some of the stuff, this is, I gotta use the old stuff because he's about to release the new stuff, and I can't do that yet. But I'll give you some info on what it's looking like so far. We've run one program 2 years ago for some RCMP. They're included in this. At the time we had over 108 veterans, 5 RCMP involved as well. So we had 115 couples. By the way, we're currently now over 150. And what we're doing is taking a look 2 years later at some of those participants as well. And at the end of the 3-day sessions, what we're getting is the veterans' self-report. What they're saying on their own is reduced PTSD symptoms and an acquisition of self-mediation skills. The spouses, they're saying there's a reduction in PTSD symptoms, and they notice the veterans are able to argue without losing it. So it comes out something like this. And I'm not going to go into heavy detail on numbers and such. The purpose of these are just to give you a visual that the information coming back from the participants is showing we're one of the best PTSD programs in North America. One of the best PTSD programs in North America. Incredibly humbling. I don't know what other word would accurately describe it. The outcomes have been incredible. And with that, it's the understanding that we need to broaden our scope. We're very fortunate Veterans Affairs Canada in 2013 provided us $25,000. In setting up Camp Praxis, it took 3 years of knocking on doors and people telling us go fuck off. We were determined. During that time of putting it all together, my own daughter came back from Afghanistan diagnosed with OSI. And she says, "Dad, you're doing it wrong. You got to get on social media, on Twitter and Facebook." And I went, what? And she was very helpful, and she got us on social media. She created our Facebook page. She created the Twitter account. Within 48 hours, the phone rang, and it was an individual from Wounded Warriors Canada saying, "Hey," and this is after 3 years of people telling us to go away, says, "How much money do you want?" I said, $4,000? Done. So with that $4,000, we were able to run our first program early February 2013. We're almost four full years of running programs now. Wednesday, Wounded Warriors Canada is going to present us a check for $200,000. We've gone from 4 to 200. And the first thing we're doing with that money, because donated money is not free money, first thing we're doing with that is Thursday morning at Windreach, we'll be running our first program for Southern Ontario Police. Our program will involve 6 police officers from Ottawa to Peel to York who have been diagnosed with PTSD and their spouse. And these funds will help us ensure that we're going to run many more in the future. And the thing that we understand about running programs for first responders is while we'll run programs for veterans, we'll run programs separately for police, and separately for fire, and separately for EMS. While you all come from, geez, I sound like you all American. While you all come from a uniform environment, you do have different cultures. And it's unfair to think that you can all be washed over with the same brush, and that those unique cultures need to be respected. And the spouses and family members understand what those unique cultures represent. Everyone deserves an opportunity to understand what OSI, and I often say just the term PTSD because that's what most people in the civilian world understand. And when I say that, I really mean OSI. Everyone deserves to understand what OSI is for themselves, for that person that's most important to them, and how they can work together to overcome the challenges. So we're saying that after almost 2 years, there's still significant residual knowledge and practical use of the skills learned on the program. And that what's happening is they're saying they notice it for themselves, and the spouses are noticing it. They're noticing the reduction in symptoms, and they're also noticing the ability to self-mediate, not medicate, mediate, and not meditation. What we're talking about is the ability to have a difficult conversation between the two of them, and it becomes a healthy outcome for them both. One of the biggest things they both realized was the reduction of anger. And part of this goes back to what Dr. Jonathan was just talking about. A lot of those perceived injustices, etc., etc., etc. And I'm sure you can understand what it's like to try and push fresh cow shit uphill with a rake. It's messy and not very effective, and you get pretty dirty. That's what it's like dealing with the bureaucracy at the national, provincial, and municipal levels of government. When we find that our folks have lost that major anger, they're recovering their lives and they're becoming healthy. And the important part is the relationship is gaining more regular and effective communication. And what we're saying is we're only one piece of the puzzle. So the way to think of our program is this way. Imagine if each and every one of you here was given a 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. Cool. No picture on the cover. That's what it's sort of like getting PTSD. You got this bunch of pieces and jumbo and everything all stuffed in and nothing to guide you by. The purpose of our program is we help individuals find the four corners of that picture and start filling in the borders. If we can help them do that, then with other programs, other therapies, other medications, etc., 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 with all that help, everyone working together, eventually you get to put all the pieces together. And there's an understanding that there's no one program, no one therapist, no one drug that will work for OSI or PTSD. It needs to be a combination. We're not going to say our program works for everyone. However, we're very fortunate with the empirical data started since February 2013 to say the vast majority, it's over 81%, are saying this has an effect of enormous proportions in a very positive, satisfying way for them. For that, once again, we're very humbled. So basically, what's happening is the veteran's able to talk more about what's bothering them, and the spouse is saying, hey, we get to talk. Notice it's all about talking. No communication, no resolution. So all we want is people to be able to talk to each other in an effective way that helps them move forward and overcome the challenges of PTSD. And you heard a bit about earlier about why horses. I just would like to expand on that real quick because we're not teaching people how to be horsemen. We're not teaching people how to be cowboys or anything of that nature. Camp Praxis is actually 3 phases, 3 days each. The first phase is all groundwork. And once again, the reason we're using for horses is, one, they're a social animal. They crave, desire, need, demand social interaction. If you see a horse out in the field all day, every day, all by itself, that's like punishment, throwing a horse in solitary confinement. 2, horses, a group of horses will have their own built-in chain of command. So, coming from a uniform environment, it makes you pretty comfortable being able to figure that out, and you get to relax pretty quick. Third, and most important, as you heard a bit earlier, is horses evolved as a prey animal. Because of that, they will be hypersensitive, hyper alert, and they can be on edge because they are constantly evaluating the situation around them non-stop. Because of that, they have that unique ability that when you walk up, if you're a dickhead, they'll let you know. And when it's a large animal in your face with no agenda, no watch, it's hard to argue. Also, if you're an individual who's no longer social at all, you're hiding in the basement with the blinds closed, drapes closed, not talking to anyone, the horse will walk all over you. So what we're doing is we're helping you get to that place, mentally and physically, standing there where the horse looks at you, and the horse sees someone and they go, you know what? I can relearn how to trust that person. I can relearn how to respect that person. And the horse will go up to them without a lead, without a rope, because they see value in that individual. And if a horse can do that, there's every chance your relationship can as well. So it's not hug a horse and the world's problems go away. That's a crock of shit. What we do know, thanks to Dr. Brenda Abbey and her study, is that the human brain around horses produces dopamine. Dopamine is that natural feel-good aha. What we also know during a PTSD crisis is the higher functioning part of the brain disconnects from the primitive part of the brain. When around horses, what that dopamine can do, that dopamine can reconnect the primitive portion with the higher functioning part of the brain. When that happens, Jim and I sneak in a little door, we plant some seeds of education, and step out. And our focus is, when you leave the program, you've learned some skills that help you communicate effectively, regardless of how serious the traumas are that you're dealing with. And we do not talk about the past. That is a completely different kind of therapy. We're not qualified for it. We're just helping people understand where their boots are at now and what would they like to do with them tomorrow. And I gotta say thank you to Wounded Warriors. I mean, they're gonna give us $200,000, so I gotta do a plug for them. And touching on that, some of you that may have done that 22 push-up challenge and donated money to Wounded Warriors, we're one of the 15 programs that will receive a benefit for it. So, you weren't doing push-ups as a waste of time, and you weren't doing push-ups just to feel good. You were doing push-ups that are creating the opportunities and helping us run our first program for the police in Ontario starting Thursday. So your efforts are real, they do matter, and they do count. And for that, I want to say thank you, and thank you for Badge of Life for inviting us here. Very much appreciate it, and you folks are awesome. Have a good one.
Okay, before we go on, just really quickly, we're going to have some draws.